He was born into privilege, destined for the perfect society marriage, until he shattered everything by walking away at the altar.
I can't marry you.
Lost and broken, he found solace in the one person who saw him not as a millionaire heir, but simply as a man.
Are you all right, Mr. Hale?
You're the first person who's talked to me today without yelling or crying.
What began as a moment of compassion ignited something neither could deny.
I believe it's better to be honest than to live a lie.
But when a man of status falls for a woman, society calls beneath him. Some love stories demand a sacrifice that could cost them everything. Will Preston choose love over fortune? And will Talia risk her heart on a man from a world that destroyed her mother? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The Fairbridge estate was a sight to behold on this sunny Saturday morning. Hundreds of white roses decorated the gardens, and workers rushed to set up chairs for what the local papers called the wedding of the decade. With its white columns and perfectly manicured lawns, had hosted countless society weddings, but none as grand as this one. Talia Brooks wiped the sweat from her brow as she polished the last of the silver candlesticks. At 25, she had already spent 5 years working as a live-in maid at the estate. Her dark curly hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her uniform was crisp, despite the Georgia heat. "Talia, we need more towels in the bridal suite," called Mrs. Winters, the head housekeeper. "And make sure you're invisible when you deliver them. Miss Ashcroft is in one of her moods." "Yes, ma'am," Talia replied, gathering a stack of fresh towels. As she climbed the grand staircase, Talia heard raised voices coming from the bridal suite. She paused outside the door, hesitant to knock. "I told you I wanted white peonies, not roses," Genevieve Ashcroft's voice rang out. "Daddy spent a fortune on this wedding, and I will not have it ruined by incompetence." Talia took a deep breath and knocked softly. "What?" Genevieve snapped as she opened the door. She was beautiful in her designer wedding dress, her blonde hair perfectly styled, but her face was twisted in anger. "The towels you requested, Miss Ashcroft," Talia said, keeping her eyes down. "Just put them in the bathroom," Genevieve sighed, turning back to her bridesmaids. "Can you believe Preston hasn't even called me this morning? It's bad luck to see the bride, but a text message wouldn't kill him." Talia slipped into the bathroom, quickly arranged the towels, and made her exit. As she walked down the hallway, she nearly bumped into a tall man standing by the window looking out at the gardens below. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, stepping back. The man turned and Talia recognized him immediately. Preston Hale, the groom himself, was standing before her in his morning suit, his dark hair neatly combed and his face handsome but troubled. At 30, he was one of Georgia's most eligible bachelors, wealthy from one of Savannah's oldest families, and about to marry a senator's daughter. "No need to apologize," he said, his voice quiet. "I'm the one who shouldn't be wandering around." Talia noticed his hands were shaking slightly. "Are you all right, Mr. Hale?" Preston looked at her, really looked at her, as if surprised that someone had actually asked him that question. I don't know," he admitted. "Everyone's running around making sure the flowers are perfect and the champagne is chilled, but nobody's asked me that." "Wedding day nerves are normal," Talia offered with a small smile. Preston laughed, but there was no joy in it. "Is it nerves when you feel like you're walking to your execution?" The rawness of his words startled her. This wasn't how happy grooms talked on their wedding day. "Mr. Hale, Preston, there you are." A middle-aged woman in an expensive blue dress approached them. "You know it's bad luck to be near the bridal suite, and why are you talking to the help?" Preston's mother, Elizabeth Hale, gave Talia a dismissive glance. "Don't you have work to do, girl?" she asked coldly. "Yes, ma'am," Talia replied, turning to leave. "Wait," Preston said. "What's your name?" "Talia. Talia Brooks, sir." "Thank you, Talia," he said, his eyes holding hers for a moment too long. As Talia walked away, she heard Preston's mother hissing at him. "Really, Preston? Chatting with the maid on your wedding day? What would Genevieve think?" The ceremony was set to begin at 4 o'clock. Talia worked in the background, making sure everything was perfect while remaining invisible, a skill she had mastered over the years. The estate's grand ballroom was filled with 500 of Savannah's elite. Senators, CEOs, and old money families sat in neat rows, waiting for the event to begin. From her position near the service entrance, Talia could see Preston standing at the altar, his best man beside him. He looked like a statue, rigid and pale. The string quartet began playing, and everyone stood as the bridesmaids started their procession. Then came Genevieve on her father's arm, floating down the aisle in her designer gown. She was smiling triumphantly, like a queen approaching her coronation, rather than a woman walking toward the man she loved. The minister began the ceremony with practiced words about love and commitment. When he reached the vows, Preston seemed to struggle to find his voice. "Do you, Preston William Hale, take Genevieve Margaret Ashcroft to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the minister asked. The silence stretched for one beat, then two. Talia watched as Preston's face went from pale to ashen. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. I can't," he said, his voice barely audible at first, then stronger. "I can't marry you." A collective gasp filled the room. Genevieve's smile froze on her face. "What did you say?" she whispered. "I'm sorry, Genevieve. I can't do this. It's not right." Preston's voice was steady now. "I can't marry you." "Preston," his mother cried from the front row, "stop this nonsense immediately." But Preston was already backing away from the altar. "I'm sorry," he said again, looking around at the shocked faces. "I'm sorry to all of you." Then he turned and walked out, leaving 500 stunned guests and one humiliated bride behind. Chaos erupted in the ballroom. Genevieve collapsed in tears while her father, Senator Ashcroft, shouted for Preston to come back. Mrs. Hale was trying to calm the guests, assuring them there had been a misunderstanding. Talia stood frozen, unable to believe what she had just witnessed. In all her years working weddings at the estate, she had never seen anything like this. Hours later, when the guests had gone and the staff was cleaning up the mess of what should have been a reception, Talia stepped outside for a breath of air. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the garden. As she walked among the rose bushes, she spotted a figure sitting on a stone bench. Preston Hale was still in his tuxedo pants and white shirt, now rumpled and untucked. His jacket and tie were tossed on the ground beside him. His shoes were off, and his bare feet rested on the cool grass. He looked broken, nothing like the confident millionaire the world knew. Talia knew she should turn around and leave him to his thoughts. It wasn't her place to intrude. But something in his dejected posture made her heart ache. "Mr. Hale," she said softly. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "The maid," he said, recognition dawning. "Talia, right?" "Yes, sir. I just wanted to make sure you're all right. It's getting cold out here." Preston laughed bitterly. "All right? I just left the daughter of one of the most powerful men in Georgia at the altar. My mother hasn't stopped calling my phone. Tomorrow, I'll be the most hated man in Savannah. So no, I'm not all right." Talia stood awkwardly, not sure what to say. She turned to leave. "Wait," Preston called. "Would you hate me less if I told you I've never been in love before?" The question caught her off guard. "Sir?" "Everyone hates me right now, and they should. What I did was horrible." He ran his hands through his hair. "But I couldn't go through with it. Every day with her felt like I was suffocating. Is that love? Should it feel like drowning?" Talia hesitated, then sat down on the far end of the bench. "I don't think so, sir." "Then why was I going to marry her?" "Sometimes people do what's expected, not what's right for them," Talia said softly, thinking of her own mother who had worked as a maid her entire life, always doing what was expected. Preston looked at her with surprise. "That's exactly it. My whole life has been about expectations. The right school, the right job, the right wife." He sighed. "But standing there at the altar, I just couldn't do it anymore." They sat in silence for a while, watching as the last light faded from the sky. Talia knew she should get back to work, but something kept her rooted to the spot. "You're the first person who's talked to me today without yelling or crying," Preston said finally. "Thank you for that." "You're welcome, Mr. Hale. Please call me Preston. After what you've witnessed today, I think we can drop the formalities." Talia smiled slightly. "I should get back to work. There's a lot to clean up. Because of me, Preston said, guilt crossing his face. I'm sorry for the extra work I've caused. It's just part of the job, Talia replied, standing up. Will you be all right out here? No, he said honestly. But I can't face anyone right now. I think I'll stay in the garden a bit longer. Talia nodded and turned to go. Talia? Preston called after her. Do you think I did the right thing? She paused, considering her words carefully. I think only you can answer that, Sir Preston. But I believe it's better to be honest than to live a lie. As she walked back to the house, Talia couldn't shake the image of Preston sitting alone in the garden, a man who had everything and nothing all at once. The next morning, Talia rose early as usual. The estate was eerily quiet after yesterday's disaster. As she prepared breakfast for the staff, Mrs. Winters entered the kitchen. Well, that was the scandal of the century, the older woman said, pouring herself coffee. The Hales are beside themselves. Can you imagine the embarrassment? What will happen now? Talia asked. Mrs. Hale says they're going to the summer house in Charleston until things die down. But young Mr. Hale is nowhere to be found. Didn't come home last night. Talia felt a twinge of worry. After how broken he had looked in the garden, she hoped he was all right. Her morning duties took her to the guest cottages, where she was surprised to find Preston asleep on the couch in the smallest one. He was still in his clothes from yesterday, a half-empty bottle of bourbon on the coffee table. She quietly began to back out of the room, but a floorboard creaked under her foot. Preston's eyes flew open. Who's there? He asked groggily. I'm sorry to disturb you, sir. It's Talia, the maid. I didn't know anyone was using this cottage. Preston sat up slowly, wincing at what must have been a terrible headache. I couldn't face going home. My parents, they wouldn't understand. Talia nodded. Would you like some coffee, sir? And perhaps some breakfast? Coffee would be heaven, he admitted. But you don't have to wait on me. I'm not exactly a welcome guest here anymore. It's my job, sir. And you still own part of the estate, don't you? Preston smiled weakly. Yes, though after yesterday my family might try to change that. Talia returned 15 minutes later with a tray of coffee, toast and eggs. Preston had washed his face and attempted to smooth his rumpled clothes. Thank you, he said as she set down the tray. You're being kind when you have every reason not to be. I ruined a huge event that probably meant a lot of work for you. Talia shrugged. We still got paid. That made Preston laugh, a genuine laugh that transformed his face. Well, there's that at least. As Talia turned to leave, Preston spoke again. I called my lawyer this morning. I'm staying here for a while in this cottage. I know it will be awkward, but I need some time to figure things out. It's not my place to have an opinion on that, sir. But you do have one, Preston observed. I can see it in your eyes. Talia hesitated. I think running away to Charleston won't solve anything, so maybe staying is brave. Preston looked at her with newfound respect. You're very direct, Talia Brooks. Only when asked, sir. Well, I'm asking for your help. I've never actually lived on my own. I don't know the first thing about cooking or cleaning or anything practical, really. Talia raised an eyebrow. Are you asking me to be your maid? No, Preston said quickly. Well, yes, but not just that. I need someone who'll be honest with me. Everyone in my life has always told me what I wanted to hear. Look where that got me. Mr. Hale, Preston, she corrected herself. I already have a job here. I know, and I'd pay you extra, of course. Just think about it. Talia nodded, not committing to anything. As she left the cottage, she couldn't help but wonder what she was getting herself into. The man had just left his bride at the altar. He was clearly going through some kind of breakdown. And yet there was something about his vulnerability that touched her. She thought of her mother's warnings about rich men and their games, how they used women like them and discarded them when convenient. But Preston didn't seem like he was playing a game. He seemed lost. As Talia went about her duties that day, the image of Preston sitting alone in that small cottage kept coming back to her. By evening, she had made her decision. She would help him, but on her terms. She wouldn't let herself become another casualty of a rich man's crisis. Little did she know that this decision would change both their lives forever. 1 week had passed since the wedding disaster, and life at Fairbridge Estate had settled into an uneasy rhythm. The staff whispered about Preston Hale living in the smallest guest cottage, and rumors flew about why the wealthy heir was hiding out instead of returning to his penthouse in downtown Savannah. Talia knocked on the cottage door, balancing a basket of clean laundry on her hip. She had agreed to help Preston adjust to his new life, coming by the cottage during her breaks and after her regular duties were done. "It's open!" Preston called from inside. Talia entered to find him attempting to cook eggs on the small stove. The kitchen was a mess, with eggshells scattered across the counter and what looked like burnt toast in the sink. "Good morning," she said, trying not to smile at his obvious struggle. "I see you're making breakfast." Preston turned, a sheepish expression on his face. "Trying to. I watched a cooking video online, but it made it look much easier." "Here," Talia said, setting down the laundry basket. "Let me show you." She took the pan from him, scraped the burnt eggs into the trash, and started fresh. "The trick is to keep the heat low," she explained as she cracked new eggs into the pan, "and to be patient." Preston watched her with admiration. "You make it look so simple." "That's because I've been cooking since I was 10, she replied. "My mother taught me. She worked 2 jobs, so I had to learn to take care of myself early." "Was she a maid too?" Preston asked, leaning against the counter. Talia nodded, her face growing serious. "Yes, she worked for a family in Charleston for 20 years. "You don't sound happy about that." Talia hesitated, then decided to be honest. She fell in love with the son of the family she worked for. He said he loved her too until she got pregnant. Then suddenly, he didn't know her anymore. Understanding dawned on Preston's face. "Your father?" "Yes," Talia said, flipping the eggs onto a plate. "He paid her to go away and keep quiet. She used that money to move here and start over, but she never got her heart back." Preston was quiet for a moment. "Is that why you keep your distance from me? You think I'm like him?" "I don't know what you're like," Talia said carefully. "But I know what happens to women like me who forget their place around men like you." The words hung between them, honest and painful. "I understand," Preston said finally, "and I respect that. I just want you to know I'm not playing games here. I'm genuinely trying to figure out who I am outside of my family's expectations." Talia nodded, handing him the plate of eggs. "Your breakfast is ready, Mr. Hale." "Preston," he corrected gently, "and thank you, not just for the eggs." Later that day, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the main house. Elizabeth Hale stepped out, her face tight with anger. Mrs. Winters hurried to greet her. "Mrs. Hale, we weren't expecting you today," the head housekeeper said. "Where is my son?" Elizabeth demanded. "I know he's hiding out here." "He's staying in the Cedar Cottage, ma'am," Mrs. Winters replied. "Shall I have someone fetch him?" "No need. I know where it is." Elizabeth started toward the cottages, then stopped. "Tell me, who's been taking care of him? He doesn't know the first thing about looking after himself." Mrs. Winters hesitated. "Well, Talia Brooks has been helping him, ma'am. Just basic things, cooking lessons, laundry." Elizabeth's eyes narrowed. "Talia? The maid he was talking to before the ceremony?" "Yes, ma'am." "I see," Elizabeth said coldly. "Well, we'll put a stop to that right now." Elizabeth marched across the grounds to the Cedar Cottage and rapped sharply on the door. Preston opened it, surprise registering on his face. "Mother," he said flatly, "to what do I owe this pleasure?" "Don't be smart with me, Preston," Elizabeth said, pushing past him into the cottage. "It's been a week since you humiliated our family in front of the entire Savannah elite. Your father is beside himself, and Senator Ashcroft is threatening to pull his support from your father's business ventures." "I'm sorry about the business implications," Preston said, "but I'm not sorry I didn't go through with the wedding." Elizabeth looked around the small cottage with disgust. "And this is where you've been hiding? Like some kind of peasant?" "I'm not hiding. I'm thinking. For the first time in my life, I'm making my own decisions." "Like having a maid teach you to cook?" Elizabeth scoffed. "I heard all about your little arrangement with that Brooks girl." Preston's face hardened. "Her name is Talia, and she's been kind enough to help me adjust." "Oh, I'm sure she has," Elizabeth said with a knowing look. Young, pretty maids are always eager to help wealthy men who are having a crisis. It's not like that, Preston insisted. She's been nothing but professional. Listen to me carefully, Preston, Elizabeth said, lowering her voice. The Ashcrofts are out for blood. Genevieve is devastated, and her father is using his connections to make life very difficult for your father. The least you can do is come home and start making amends. I can't go back yet, Preston said. I need more time. Time for what? To play house with the help? Elizabeth shook her head. Whatever game you're playing needs to end now. Come home, apologize to Genevieve, and we might be able to salvage something from this mess. I'm not apologizing to Genevieve. Marrying her would have been the real mistake. Elizabeth's face flushed with anger. You ungrateful boy. Everything we've done has been for you. The connections, the opportunities, all of it to secure your future. And this is how you repay us. I never asked for any of it, Preston said quietly. You didn't have to ask. It's your birthright, Elizabeth snapped. She took a deep breath, composing herself. I'm not leaving without you. Then you'll be here a long time. Elizabeth stared at her son, seeing the determination in his eyes. Fine. Stay here in your little fantasy world, but don't expect us to keep funding it. Your father has frozen your accounts. Preston paled slightly but stood his ground. I have my trust fund, which requires his signature for major withdrawals, as you well know, Elizabeth said with satisfaction. You have whatever cash is in your wallet and nothing else until you come to your senses. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Oh, and Preston, that maid will be fired immediately. I'll speak to management on my way out. You can't do that, Preston protested. She's done nothing wrong. I can and I will. The Hales still own controlling interest in this estate, or have you forgotten that too? Elizabeth's smile was cold. Let's see how well you manage on your own. Talia was changing linens in the main house when Mrs. Winters found her, looking troubled. Talia, I need to speak with you, the head housekeeper said gravely. Mrs. Hale was just here. She's ordered that you're to be terminated immediately. What? Talia felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Why? She said it was inappropriate for you to be spending so much time with Mr. Hale. Mrs. Winters looked genuinely sorry. I tried to explain that it was just part of your duties, but she wouldn't listen. This is my home, Talia said, feeling panic rise in her chest. The estate provided her room and board along with her salary. Where am I supposed to go? You have until the end of the day to gather your things, Mrs. Winters said. I'm so sorry, Talia. I'll give you an excellent reference. Talia sat heavily on the bed she'd been making, her mind racing. She had some savings, but not enough for a security deposit on an apartment, and jobs were scarce in Savannah, especially good ones with housing included. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Preston, his face tense. Mrs. Winters told me what happened, he said. This is my fault. Your mother doesn't want me around you, Talia said flatly. I know, and I'm not going to let her do this. Preston ran a hand through his hair. I'll fix it. How? She owns the place. Technically, my family does, and I'm still a Hale. Preston's jaw was set. Come with me. They found Mrs. Winters in her office looking miserable as she filled out termination paperwork. Mrs. Winters, Preston said firmly, I'm countermanding my mother's order. Talia stays. The head housekeeper looked uncomfortable. Mr. Hale, I understand your concern, but your mother was very clear, and she does speak for the family business. Not this time, Preston said. I still own 20% of Fairbridge Estate personally. It was a gift from my grandfather on my 21st birthday, separate from the family holdings. Mrs. Winters hesitated. I wasn't aware of that arrangement. Check the ownership papers, they're on file. Preston's voice was calm but authoritative. As a partial owner, I'm hiring Talia as my personal assistant. She'll continue to live on the grounds, and her salary will come directly from me. Talia stared at him in shock. Preston, you can't... I can, he said, turning to her. My mother just told me they've frozen my accounts, but I have some cash, and I'll figure out the rest. Please, Talia, let me fix this. Mrs. Winters looked between them, clearly conflicted. Mr. Hale, your mother will be furious. Let her be, Preston said simply. I'm done letting her control my life. After Mrs. Winters reluctantly agreed to hold off on Talia's termination pending verification of Preston's ownership claim, they walked back toward the cottages in silence. You didn't have to do that, Talia finally said. Yes, I did. It's my fault you were in this position. Preston stopped walking and turned to face her. Look, I know you're worried about becoming dependent on me, about history repeating itself, but this is just until you find something else, if that's what you want. What exactly would a personal assistant do? Talia asked skeptically. Preston smiled. Well, you could keep teaching me to cook, and maybe how to do laundry without turning everything pink. Basically, help me become a functioning adult. Despite herself, Talia laughed. That's a full-time job for sure. So you'll do it? Talia considered her options, which were admittedly limited. I'll do it temporarily, but I want everything in writing, including my duties and compensation. Absolutely, Preston agreed quickly. I'll have the estate lawyer draw up a proper contract tomorrow. As they continued walking, Talia couldn't help asking, what will you do now that your accounts are frozen? I honestly don't know, Preston admitted. I've never been without money before. Welcome to how the rest of us live, Talia said dryly. Preston looked at her with newfound respect. Will you help me figure it out? I guess that's part of my new job description, she replied, but there was a hint of a smile on her face. The next day, Talia moved her things from the staff quarters to a small room in Preston's cottage. It was all very proper. Her room had its own entrance, and Preston had the estate lawyer draw up a detailed contract specifying her duties and salary. But the gossip among the staff was immediate and merciless. She's got herself a golden ticket, Talia overheard one of the groundskeepers saying. Moving in with the boss after just 1 week. It's not like that, she wanted to protest, but she knew how it looked. Later that afternoon, as Talia was helping Preston sort through his meager wardrobe, a red sports car roared up the driveway. A moment later, there was pounding on the cottage door. Preston opened it to find Genevieve Ashcroft standing there, immaculately dressed in a designer outfit, her face a mask of controlled fury. Well, she said, looking past Preston to where Talia stood frozen. Now I understand everything. Genevieve, Preston said warily, what are you doing here? I came to see if the rumors were true. Genevieve stepped into the cottage uninvited, her eyes sweeping over the humble surroundings before landing on Talia. So this is why you left me at the altar? For the maid? It wasn't like that, Preston said firmly. My decision had nothing to do with Talia. Oh, please, Genevieve scoffed. The whole town is talking about how you've moved your little cleaning girl into your love nest. Talia felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. Miss Ashcroft, it's not what you think. I'm just working for Mr. Hale as his assistant. Is that what they're calling it these days? Genevieve laughed bitterly. How long was this going on, Preston? Were you sleeping with her before our wedding day? Or did you just happen to fall in love with the help in 1 week? That's enough, Preston said, his voice hard. Talia and I barely knew each other before the wedding, and there's nothing improper happening here. Do you expect me to believe that? Genevieve's voice rose. You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. My father's colleagues, my friends. They all saw you walk out on me. And for what? So you could play house with your maid? I didn't marry you because we didn't love each other, Preston said bluntly. You know it as well as I do. Our relationship was a business arrangement from the start. Genevieve's face flushed with anger. How dare you say that to me? It's the truth. When was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time we did anything together that wasn't for show or because our parents arranged it? We were building a future, Genevieve insisted. A perfect life. Perfect for who? Preston asked quietly. Not for me. And I don't think for you either, if you're honest with yourself. Genevieve's composure cracked. Tears welled in her eyes. You have no idea what you've done to me. The pity, the gossip. I can't even go to my favorite restaurant without people whispering. For a moment, Talia felt a surge of sympathy for the woman. Humiliation was painful, no matter how privileged your life might be otherwise. I'm sorry for hurting you, Preston said, his voice gentler. I truly am. But marrying you would have hurt us both more in the long run. Genevieve wiped away a tear, her vulnerability quickly replaced by cold anger. You'll regret this, Preston. My father isn't a man you want as an enemy. She turned to Talia, looking her up and down with contempt. And you, don't get too comfortable. Men like Preston don't end up with women like you. You're just a distraction until he comes to his senses." With that, she stalked out, slamming the door behind her. Talia and Preston stood in awkward silence for a moment. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," Preston finally said. "She's hurting," Talia replied simply, "and she's not entirely wrong about how this looks." "I don't care how it looks," Preston said with sudden intensity. "For the first time in my life, I'm making choices based on what feels right, not on what other people think." Talia looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the sincerity in his eyes. This wasn't a rich man's game or a temporary rebellion. Preston Hale was genuinely trying to find himself. "So," she said, changing the subject, "about that laundry lesson we were going to have." Preston smiled gratefully. "Yes, please, before I run out of clean shirts." 2 weeks later, life had fallen into a new rhythm. Talia had taught Preston the basics of cooking, cleaning, and laundry. In return, he helped her study for the online business courses she'd enrolled in, using his laptop since she didn't have one of her own. They spent evenings on the cottage porch, talking about everything and nothing. Preston told her about the pressure of growing up as a Hale, always having to maintain the family image. Talia shared stories of her childhood, of her mother's strength and sacrifice. "She worked so hard to give me opportunities she never had," Talia said one evening as they sat watching the sunset. "College wasn't an option for her, but she was determined I would go." "Did you?" Preston asked. 2 years at community college before the money ran out," Talia replied. "That's when I started working here. The plan was to save up and go back, but..." She shrugged. "Life got in the way." "What would you study if you could go back?" "Business management," Talia said without hesitation. "I've always wanted to run my own housekeeping service, be the boss instead of the worker." Preston was quiet for a moment. "You'd be good at it. You're organized, practical, and you don't take nonsense from anyone, including me." Talia laughed. "Someone has to keep you in line." Their easy conversation was interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. A taxi pulled up, and a middle-aged black woman stepped out looking uncertainly at the cottage. Talia leapt to her feet. "Mom?" Dorothy Brooks smiled as her daughter ran to embrace her. "Surprise, baby." "What are you doing here? I thought you were in Florida with Aunt Jenny." Talia hugged her mother tightly. "I was, until I got a concerning call from Mrs. Winters." Dorothy looked over Talia's shoulder at Preston, who had stood politely. "She said you'd been fired and then rehired by the Hale boy as his personal assistant. I needed to see for myself what was going on." "Mom, this is Preston Hale. Preston, this is my mother, Dorothy Brooks." Preston stepped forward, extending his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Brooks." Dorothy assessed him coolly before taking his hand. "Mr. Hale, I've heard quite a bit about you in the past weeks. The man who left his bride at the altar has been all over the news." Preston winced. "Not my finest moment, I admit." "And now you've got my daughter living in your house," Dorothy continued, her tone making it clear what she thought of that arrangement. "Mom, it's not like that," Talia said quickly. "I have my own room with a separate entrance. It's all very professional." Dorothy clearly wasn't convinced. "Mr. Hale, would you mind if I spoke to my daughter alone?" "Of course not. Please, use the cottage. I'll take a walk." Preston nodded respectfully to Dorothy before heading toward the gardens. Once inside, Dorothy didn't mince words. "Talia Marie Brooks, what do you think you're doing? Living with a white millionaire who just jilted his fiancée? Do you have any idea how this looks?" "Mom, I know how it seems, but it's not romantic. He needed help learning to live independently, and I needed a job after his mother tried to fire me." "So he swoops in like some kind of prince and saves you?" Dorothy shook her head. "Baby, I've seen this story before. I lived this story." "Preston's not like Dad," Talia insisted. "He's different." "They all seem different at first," Dorothy said softly. "Your father was charming and kind too. He made me feel special, seen, until I became inconvenient." Talia sat down on the couch, suddenly tired. "What was I supposed to do, Mom? I had nowhere else to go." Dorothy sat beside her, taking her hand. "I know, baby, and I'm not blaming you. I'm just scared for you. Men like him, they live in a different world, one that people like us can visit but never truly belong to. It's just temporary, Talia assured her. Until I save enough to get my own place. And what if your feelings get involved before then? Dorothy asked gently. I see the way you talk about him. There's something there already. Talia couldn't meet her mother's eyes. I'm being careful. Oh, Talia. Dorothy sighed. The heart doesn't know how to be careful. They talked for hours, Dorothy sharing more details about her relationship with Talia's father than she ever had before. The sweet beginning, the secret meetings, the promises, and then the crushing rejection when his family found out. I don't want that pain for you, Dorothy said. You deserve someone who's proud to stand beside you in the daylight, not just behind closed doors. Preston's not ashamed of me, Talia said defensively. Maybe not now, when he's rebelling against his family. But what happens when real life sets in? When his trust fund runs out or his family pressures him enough? Talia had no answer for that. Later, as they prepared dinner together, Preston returned from his walk. He insisted that Dorothy stay in his room while he took the couch, and he proved to be a gracious host, showing her the simple pasta dish Talia had taught him to make. Dorothy watched him carefully throughout the evening, noting how he looked at her daughter when he thought no one was watching. There was respect there, and something more, something that worried her even as she found herself liking the earnest young man. After Talia went to bed, Dorothy sat on the porch with Preston. Mr. Hale, she began, I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Of course, Preston said. What are your intentions toward my daughter? Preston seemed taken aback by the directness of the question. Mrs. Brooks, Talia is my employee and my friend. Nothing inappropriate has happened between us. I didn't ask what has happened, I asked about your intentions. Dorothy's eyes were penetrating. Because I see the way you look at her. Preston was quiet for a long moment. I admire your daughter greatly. She's strong, smart, and honest in a way few people in my life have ever been. But I also respect her boundaries and her history. Her history? She told me about her father, Preston said quietly. About what happened to you. Dorothy's face showed surprise, then sadness. She doesn't usually share that story. I think she wanted me to understand why she keeps her distance, Preston admitted. And I do understand. The last thing I want is to hurt her. Sometimes hurt happens even when we don't intend it, Dorothy said. Especially when people come from different worlds. You're right, Preston acknowledged, and I don't have all the answers. I'm still figuring out who I am without my family's money and expectations, but I can promise you this. I respect Talia too much to treat her as anything less than the remarkable woman she is. Dorothy studied him, searching for any sign of insincerity. My daughter has a big heart, Mr. Hale. She takes care of everyone else before herself. Don't take advantage of that kindness. I won't, Preston promised. And please, call me Preston. As Dorothy prepared for bed that night, she worried about the situation her daughter had gotten herself into. But she had to admit that Preston Hale wasn't what she had expected. There was a humility to him that was rare in people born to privilege. Still, she remembered all too well the sweet words Charles Brooks had spoken to her 26 years ago, before his family had made it clear that the son of the house did not marry the maid, no matter what promises had been made. She wouldn't let history repeat itself with her daughter. Not if she could help it. Dorothy Brooks stayed at the cottage for 3 days, watching closely as her daughter and Preston settled into their unusual arrangement. Despite her initial concerns, she had to admit that Preston treated Talia with genuine respect. There was nothing inappropriate in their interactions, and yet she could sense the undercurrent of something growing between them. On the morning of her departure, Dorothy pulled Talia aside while Preston loaded her suitcase into the taxi. I still don't like this situation, she said frankly, but that young man isn't what I expected. He's trying to find his way, Mom, Talia replied, just like the rest of us. Dorothy touched her daughter's cheek. Just remember what I told you. Guard your heart until you're sure he's willing to stand beside you in the daylight, not just behind closed doors. I know, Mom. I'm being careful. Dorothy glanced over at Preston, who was chatting with the taxi driver. For what it's worth, I think he might be different from your father, but only time will tell. After Dorothy left, life at the cottage fell into a comfortable routine. Preston continued to learn the basics of independence, and Talia found herself impressed by his willingness to do the work. Unlike other wealthy people she'd worked for, he never complained about manual tasks or treated them as beneath him. One evening, as Preston struggled to fix a leaky faucet in the kitchen, Talia leaned against the doorframe, amused by his determination. "You know, most rich people would just call a plumber," she remarked. Preston looked up from under the sink, his face streaked with water and frustration. "I'm not most rich people. Besides, I'm not exactly rich at the moment." It was true. In the month since his mother had frozen his accounts, Preston had been living off his dwindling cash reserves. He'd sold his expensive watch and cufflinks to a pawn shop in town, using the money to pay Talia's salary and buy groceries. "You could always call your parents," Talia suggested, "not for the first time. Make peace with them." Preston slid out from under the sink, sitting up to look at her. "That would mean going back to being who they want me to be. I can't do that anymore. Even if it means living like this." Talia gestured around the modest cottage. "Even then," Preston said with certainty, "I've never been happier than I am right now, leaky pipes and all." The sincerity in his voice made Talia's heart flutter, a reaction she immediately tried to suppress. This was her employer, her friend perhaps, but nothing more. She couldn't afford to forget that. "Well, Mr. Plumber, dinner's ready whenever you get that sink fixed," she said lightly, turning back toward the kitchen. "Talia," Preston called after her, making her pause. "Thank you, not just for dinner, but for everything, for showing me how to live like a real person." The simple gratitude in his voice touched her. "You're welcome, Preston." The next morning, Talia was surprised to find Preston dressed in a suit, one of the few he'd brought with him to the cottage. "What's the occasion?" she asked as he straightened his tie. "Job interview," he replied, "at the Savannah Bank downtown." Talia nearly choked on her coffee. "You're applying for a job? At a bank?" "Why is that so shocking?" Preston looked slightly offended. "I do have a business degree from Harvard." "I know, but..." Talia gestured vaguely. "You've never had to work before." "Exactly. It's time I changed that." Preston picked up his car keys. "The cash from my watch and cufflinks won't last forever, and I refuse to crawl back to my parents. So, I'm getting a job." Talia felt a surge of respect for him. "I'm impressed, really." "Don't be impressed yet. Save that for when I actually get hired." Preston smiled, but there was nervousness in his eyes. "How do I look? Trustworthy? Banking professional?" "You look perfect," Talia said honestly, then quickly added, "For a job interview, I mean." "Wish me luck?" Preston asked, heading for the door. "Good luck," she replied, surprised by how much she meant it. After he left, Talia busied herself with housework, trying not to think about how much their lives had intertwined in just a few short weeks. She had her own plans to focus on. She'd been saving most of her salary and applying for scholarships to finish her business degree. She was in the middle of cleaning when her phone rang. It was Mrs. Winters. "Talia, I need to speak with you," the head housekeeper said, her voice tense. "Can you come to the main house right away?" "Of course. Is something wrong?" "Just come quickly, please." When Talia arrived at Mrs. Winters' office, she found the head housekeeper looking worried. "Close the door," Mrs. Winters instructed. Once Talia had done so, she continued, "There's a problem. Senator Ashcroft was here this morning, meeting with the estate's board of directors." Talia felt a chill. "What kind of problem?" "The senator is calling in loans that he made to Fairbridge Estate 5 years ago, loans that aren't due for another 3 years. It's clearly retaliation for what happened with the wedding, but there's nothing we can do." Mrs. Winters sighed heavily. "The estate doesn't have the funds to repay immediately. If we can't come up with the money, we'll have to sell a significant portion of the property." "What does this have to do with me?" Talia asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew. Senator Ashcroft specifically mentioned that he finds it distasteful that you're still employed here after what happened. Mrs. Winters looked genuinely apologetic. "The board is pressuring me to terminate your employment, saying Mr. Hale doesn't have the authority to override them on staffing decisions." Talia sat down heavily. So I'm fired. Again? Not yet, Mrs. Winters said carefully. I convinced them to give me 2 weeks to sort things out. But Talia, you need to understand. This isn't just about you anymore. The senator is threatening the livelihood of everyone who works here. The implication was clear. Talia needed to leave for the good of all the other staff members. I understand, she said quietly. I'll start looking for another position. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Winters said, genuine regret in her voice. For what it's worth, I think this is terribly unfair. As Talia walked back to the cottage, her mind raced. She had known from the beginning that her arrangement with Preston was temporary, but she hadn't expected it to end like this, with her presence threatening the jobs of all her colleagues. Preston returned from his interview looking both exhilarated and exhausted. How did it go? Talia asked, forcing cheerfulness into her voice. Honestly, I have no idea, Preston admitted, loosening his tie. The interview seemed to go well, but then the bank president asked if I was that Preston Hale, the one who left Senator Ashcroft's daughter at the altar. He grimaced. The conversation cooled considerably after that. I'm sorry, Talia said, genuinely disappointed for him. It's fine. There are other banks. Preston noticed her expression. What's wrong? You seem upset. Talia hesitated, then decided honesty was best. Senator Ashcroft came to the estate today. He's calling in loans early, putting financial pressure on the board, and he made it clear that my continued employment here is part of the problem. Preston's face darkened with anger. That vindictive, he cut himself off. What did the board say? Mrs. Winters bought me 2 weeks, but the message was clear. I need to leave for the sake of everyone else who works here. This is ridiculous, Preston fumed. They can't fire you for associating with me. Actually, they can, Talia said calmly, and it makes sense from their perspective. Why risk the entire estate for one maid? You're not just one maid, Preston insisted, and I won't let them force you out because of me. Preston, stop. Talia's voice was firm. This isn't your decision to make. I was planning to move on eventually anyway. This just speeds up my timeline. Preston stared at her, his face a mix of guilt and frustration. Where will you go? I have some savings. I'll find a place in town, maybe take on housekeeping clients, until I figure out my next steps. Talia tried to sound more confident than she felt. This is my fault, Preston said, sitting down heavily on the couch. I've upended your life because I couldn't go through with a wedding. You did what you had to do, Talia said gently, sitting beside him, and I'll do what I have to do now. Preston was quiet for a long moment, then turned to look at her with sudden intensity. Come with me. What? Let's leave Savannah, start fresh somewhere else, where the Ashcrofts and the Hales don't control everything. His eyes were bright with conviction. I have a friend in Charleston who owns a restaurant. He's been asking me to invest for years. I could work there, learn the business from the ground up. Preston, you're not thinking clearly, Talia said, trying to ignore the way her heart had leapt at his suggestion. What about my plans, my education? There are colleges in Charleston too, better ones than here. He took her hand impulsively. Talia, the past month with you has shown me what real life is like, not the artificial world I grew up in. I don't want to go back to that, and I don't want to lose this. He gestured between them. This, Talia echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. Us, working together, being honest with each other. Preston's voice dropped. I care about you, Talia, more than I should, probably. The admission hung in the air between them, changing everything. Talia slowly withdrew her hand from his. Preston, we can't, she said softly. You know we can't. Why not? Because this isn't real life, she insisted. This is you rebelling against your family, figuring yourself out. And that's fine, that's what you need right now. But I can't build my future on someone else's identity crisis. The words stung. She could see that in his eyes. But Talia knew they needed to be said. Her mother's warnings echoed in her mind. Is that what you think this is? Preston asked, hurt evident in his voice. An identity crisis? Isn't it? A month ago you were about to marry a senator's daughter. Now you want to run away with your maid to Charleston? Talia stood up, needing distance between them. Preston, you don't even know who you are yet without your family's money and name. How can you know what you really want? Preston looked as though she'd slapped him. I thought you, of all people, saw the real me. I see someone trying to find himself, Talia said gently. And I admire that, but I can't risk my heart on a journey of self-discovery that might end with you realizing you belong in your old world after all. That won't happen, Preston insisted. You can't promise that, Talia replied, and I can't take that chance. Not when I've seen firsthand what happens when women like me believe the promises of men like you. Preston was silent for a long moment. So what now? He finally asked. Now I find a new job and a new place to live, Talia said practically, and you keep figuring out who you really are. The distance between them felt wider than the few feet that physically separated them. For the first time since they'd begun this strange arrangement, the silence between them was uncomfortable. The next morning, Preston was gone before Talia woke up. He'd left a note saying he had errands to run in town and would be back by evening. Talia tried not to feel hurt by his abrupt departure, reminding herself that maintaining distance was for the best. She spent the day searching online for apartments and jobs, but the options were depressingly limited. Affordable housing in Savannah was scarce, and most housekeeping positions paid significantly less than what she earned at Fairbridge. Around noon, there was a knock at the cottage door. Talia opened it to find Genevieve Ashcroft standing there, looking immaculate as always in designer clothes, but with a different energy than during her last visit. Less angry, more calculating. "Hello, Talia," Genevieve said coolly. "May I come in?" Warily, Talia stepped aside. "Preston isn't here." "I know," Genevieve replied, glancing around the cottage with barely disguised disdain. "I saw him in town. I came to speak with you, actually." Talia crossed her arms defensively. "What about?" "I understand my father's actions have put you in a difficult position," Genevieve said, settling herself on the couch as if she owned it. "About to lose your job and your home. That must be stressful." "What do you want, Miss Ashcroft?" Talia asked bluntly. Genevieve smiled thinly. "I want to offer you a solution to your problems." "I'm listening," Talia said cautiously. "I'm prepared to offer you $50,000, Genevieve said. "Cash tax-free. Enough to start a new life anywhere you choose, far from Savannah." Talia stared at her in disbelief. "You're trying to buy me off." "I prefer to think of it as compensating you for your inconvenience," Genevieve replied smoothly. "The money is yours, no strings attached. All I ask is that you leave, today." "And Preston, what about him?" Genevieve waved a dismissive hand. "Preston is going through a phase. He's rebelling against his parents, against the expectations of his class. It's not uncommon for men of his background to slum it for while when they feel trapped." Her eyes narrowed. "But make no mistake, men like Preston always return to where they belong." The casual cruelty of her words made Talia flinch. "You don't know him as well as you think you do." "I've known Preston Hale since we were children," Genevieve countered. "I know exactly who he is and what he needs. This little experiment in common living, it's temporary. Eventually he'll realize that he's not cut out for poverty." "Is that what this is about? You want him back?" Talia asked incredulously. Genevieve laughed, the sound brittle. "God, no. That ship has sailed. But our families are still intertwined in business and social circles. It would be best for everyone if Preston came to his senses and returned to his proper place in society." "And you think my leaving will accomplish that?" "I think without you to play house with, he'll have to face reality." Genevieve reached into her designer purse and pulled out an envelope. $50,000, Talia. A fresh start. All you have to do is walk away." Talia looked at the envelope, temptation washing over her. That money would solve all her immediate problems. She could find an apartment, finish her degree, maybe even start the business she'd always dreamed of. But at what cost? "No," Talia said firmly, not touching the envelope. "I won't be bought off." Genevieve's polished facade cracked slightly, showing irritation beneath. "Don't be foolish. You know as well as I do that this situation can't last. My father will make sure you lose your job here. The Hales will eventually bring Preston back into the fold. Why not profit from the inevitable?" Because I don't make life decisions based on money, Talia replied. And I don't abandon friends because it's convenient. Friends? Genevieve's laugh was cruel. Is that what you think you are to him? A friend? My dear, you're a novelty, a working-class girl who treats him like a normal person instead of Preston Hale, millionaire heir. It's refreshing for him, I'm sure, but it's not lasting. Her words hit too close to Talia's own doubts, but she refused to show it. I think you should leave, Miss Ashcroft. Genevieve stood, her expression hardening. I'm trying to help you, Talia, give you a dignified exit before things get ugly. I appreciate your concern, Talia said sarcastically, but I can manage my own life. Have it your way, Genevieve said coldly, returning the envelope to her purse. But remember this moment, when you're struggling to pay rent on a minimum wage, job, wondering where it all went wrong. She headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Talia, when Preston inevitably returns to his real life, don't expect even a backward glance. Men like him don't remember the help. After Genevieve left, Talia sat heavily on the couch, her composure crumbling. The worst part wasn't Genevieve's offer or her threats. It was that some small part of Talia feared she might be right. Preston returned to the cottage that evening looking different, energized, purposeful. He found Talia sitting on the porch steps watching the sunset. There you are, he said, joining her. Agreed to unfreeze one of my smaller accounts. Enough to live on modestly while I get this nonsense out of my system, as he put it. That's progress, I guess, Talia said cautiously. It's more than that, Preston replied, his eyes intense. I also asked him to stop the pressure campaign against you at Fairbridge. I explained that you've been helping me, not manipulating me as they seem to believe. Talia felt a surge of hope. What did he say to that? He said he'd speak to Senator Ashcroft, try to smooth things over. Preston reached for her hand. I can't promise it will work, but it's a start. Winter's asking her to come to the main house immediately. She arrived expecting the worst, that the 2-week grace period had been cut short. Instead, she found Mrs. Winters looking puzzled, but pleased. The board called an emergency meeting this morning, the head housekeeper explained. Apparently there's been a change of heart. Senator Ashcroft has agreed to extend the loan terms, and the pressure to terminate your employment has mysteriously disappeared. Really? Talia couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. Yes, and there's more. Mrs. Winters handed her an envelope. Mrs. Hale Preston's mother asked me to give you this. Warily, Talia opened the envelope to find a formal letter offering her a promotion to assistant estate manager with a significant raise and expanded responsibilities. I don't understand, Talia said, staring at the letter. A week ago, Mrs. Hale wanted me fired. Now she's offering me a promotion. It's strange, I agree, Mrs. Winters said, but perhaps she's reconsidering her position. The letter mentioned your dedication and potential. Talia's instincts told her there was more to this sudden change of heart. She thanked Mrs. Winters and headed back to the cottage, her mind racing with questions. She found Preston in the small garden behind the cottage, attempting to weed the flower beds, another new skill he was learning. Preston, she called, holding up the letter. Did you know about this? He straightened up, wiping soil from his hands. About what? Your mother offered me a promotion, assistant estate manager. Preston's surprise seemed genuine. No, I had no idea. That's unexpected. It's more than unexpected, it's suspicious, Talia said, sitting on the garden bench. First, I won't stand in the way of your career, Talia. That wouldn't be fair. His selflessness touched her deeply. Here was a man who, despite his feelings for her, was willing to put her ambitions first. It was so different from what her mother had experienced, so different from what she had expected. I need to think about it, Talia said finally. Of course. Preston's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. That evening, Talia drove to the small apartment complex where her mother was staying during her visit to Savannah. She needed advice from the one person who understood the complexities of her situation. Dorothy welcomed her with a warm hug and hot tea, listening intently as Talia explained the latest developments. "So now I have options," Talia concluded. "I can take the promotion, which means moving back to the main house and essentially ending whatever is developing with Preston, or I can turn it down and keep things as they are." "What does your heart tell you?" Dorothy asked gently. "That's the problem," Talia admitted. "My heart and my head are saying different things. My head says take the promotion, it's a good career move, but my heart," she trailed off, "wants to stay with him," Dorothy finished for her. "Yes," Talia whispered, "which is crazy, right? We've only known each other for what, 6 weeks? And he's still figuring himself out, still dealing with his family. It makes no logical sense." Dorothy was quiet for a long moment, stirring her tea thoughtfully. "You know, when I met your father, I knew within a month that he was the one. Sometimes the heart knows quickly." "But you were wrong about him," Talia pointed out. "No," Dorothy said surprisingly. "I wasn't wrong about loving him. I was wrong about his character, about his strength. He loved me, I believe that. But he didn't love me enough to stand up to his family, to choose me when it became difficult." She reached across the table to take Talia's hand. "The question isn't whether you should trust your heart about loving Preston. The question is whether Preston is the kind of man who will choose you when it's hard, when there's a cost." "How do I know that?" Talia asked, frustration in her voice. "How can anyone know that until it happens?" "You watch," Dorothy said simply. Dorothy acknowledged. "Only you can decide if he's worth that risk." As Talia drove back to Fairbridge that night, her mind was a tangle of thoughts and emotions. The practical choice was clear. Take the promotion, focus on her career, protect her heart. But when had the heart ever listened to practical considerations? When she arrived at the cottage, she found Preston sitting on the porch, waiting for her. Beside him was a small gift-wrapped box. "What's this?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Open it," he said, a nervous edge to his voice. Inside the box was a key, a simple, ordinary key. "I don't understand," Talia said, looking at him questioningly. "It's a key to an apartment in town," Preston explained. "I signed the lease today. It's small, nothing fancy, but it's close to the restaurant where I'll be working." "You're moving out?" Talia felt a pang of disappointment. "No, not exactly." Preston took a deep breath. "I want you to have options, Talia. Real ones, not manipulated by my family. If you want the promotion, take it. If you don't, this key is yours. You can have your own place, your independence, while we figure out whatever this is between us." Talia stared at the key in her palm. "You rented an apartment for me?" "For you," Preston confirmed. "Not for us. There's no pressure, no expectations. Just a choice that's truly yours to make." The gesture overwhelmed her. It wasn't grand or flashy, just a simple key to a modest apartment. But it represented something profound. Freedom. The freedom to choose based on her own desires, not financial necessity or family manipulation. "Why would you do this?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Because I meant what I said yesterday," Preston replied simply. "I'm falling in love with you, Talia Brooks. And love doesn't trap people. It sets them free." Talia felt tears well in her eyes. In that moment, the last of her defenses crumbled. She leaned forward and kissed him, their first kiss gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, Talia rested her forehead against his. "I haven't decided anything yet," she whispered, "about the promotion or the apartment or us." "I know," Preston said, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." As they sat together under the stars, Talia knew she was standing at a crossroads. Whatever she decided would shape not just her career, but her heart. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her story could have a different ending than her mother's. But even as that hope blossomed, storm clouds were gathering. In her office at the Ashcroft mansion across town, Genevieve was making plans of her own, plans that would test Preston and Talia's newfound connection in ways they couldn't imagine. A week had passed since Preston had given Talia the key to the apartment, and she still hadn't made her decision. The promotion offer from Mrs. Hale sat on her dresser, unsigned. The apartment key remained in its small box. Meanwhile, life at the cottage continued as they both pretended that these decisions weren't looming over them. Preston had started his job at the restaurant, coming home late with tired feet but a genuine smile. There was pride in his eyes when he told Talia about mastering the computerized ordering system or handling a difficult customer. For the first time in his life, he was earning his own way, and that knowledge seemed to transform him. Talia watched this transformation with growing admiration. This wasn't a spoiled rich boy playing at being normal. This was a man genuinely trying to build a life on his own terms. One evening, as they sat on the porch after dinner, Preston's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's my mother," he said, hesitating before answering. "Hello?" Talia could hear Elizabeth Hale's voice, though not her words. Whatever she was saying, it was causing Preston's expression to darken. "No, Mother, I won't be attending," he said firmly. "I understand it's important, but I have to work that night." He listened for a moment longer. "Yes, work, at a restaurant. No, not as an investor, as a waiter." Talia tried not to eavesdrop, but it was impossible not to hear Preston's side of the conversation. Trying to step around her. "Not so fast," Genevieve said, blocking her path. "I've been meaning to speak with you again. I hear you're considering a promotion at Fairbridge. Smart move. Finally recognizing where you belong." "I haven't decided yet," Talia replied, keeping her voice even. "No?" Genevieve's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "Still holding out hope that Preston will choose you over his family, over his entire world?" "I'm not having this conversation with you," Talia said, attempting again to walk away. "You should know," Genevieve called after her. "Preston called me last night." That stopped Talia in her tracks. She turned slowly. "What?" Genevieve smiled, knowing she'd hit her mark. "Yes, we had quite a long talk. About the past, about his family, about his future." "You're lying," Talia said, but a seed of doubt had been planted. "Am I?" Genevieve reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, showing Talia the call log. There it was, a 45-minute call from Preston's number, time-stamped just after midnight, after he'd said goodnight to Talia. "He didn't tell you?" Genevieve's voice dripped with false sympathy. "How interesting. I wonder what else he's not telling you." Talia felt sick. What did he want? "That's between Preston and me," Genevieve said, slipping her phone back into her purse. "But I will say this. He's starting to remember where he belongs. The Hale Foundation Gala is next weekend. I imagine it will be quite the reunion." With that, she brushed past Talia and entered the boutique, leaving Talia standing on the sidewalk with her mind racing. Preston had told her he wasn't going to the gala. He'd told her he was working that night. Had he lied? And why would he call Genevieve, of all people? Talia tried to push the doubts away as she finished her errands, but they clung to her like shadows. By the time she returned to the cottage, she was a mess of conflicting emotions. Preston was in the kitchen preparing lunch. "Hey," he said cheerfully. "I thought we could eat on the porch. It's beautiful out." He stopped, noticing her expression. "What's wrong?" "Did you call Genevieve last night?" Talia asked directly. Preston froze, surprise crossing his face. "What?" "After we said goodnight. Did you call Genevieve Ashcroft?" His hesitation told her everything. "Talia, it's not what you think." "So you did call her," Talia said, her voice flat. "Why?" Preston sighed, putting down the knife he'd been using to cut vegetables. "She called me, actually. I declined the call. But then she texted saying it was important, something about legal issues between our families. I called her back out of concern." "And you didn't think to mention this to me?" "Honestly, no." Preston looked confused by her reaction. "It was late, and it turned out to be nothing important. She mostly wanted to talk about old times, to remind me of all I'm missing by hiding out here." "For 45 minutes, Talia said skeptically. "I was trying to be polite," Preston explained. "Every time I tried to end the call, she'd bring up something else. Eventually, I just had to cut her off." It sounded reasonable, but doubt had taken root in Talia's mind. "She said you're planning to attend the Hale Foundation Gala next weekend." "What?" Preston looked genuinely shocked. I specifically told my mother I'm not going. I have to work that night. Are you sure about that? Talia pressed, because Genevieve seemed very certain. Talia, Preston said, moving toward her, Genevieve is manipulating you. Can't you see that? What I see, Talia said, stepping back, is that you kept a lengthy midnight conversation with your ex-fiancé secret from me. It wasn't secret. It just wasn't important enough to mention. Preston protested. Why are you letting Genevieve get into your head like this? The question hit home, making Talia pause. Why was she so quick to doubt him? Was it because, deep down, she still couldn't believe that someone like Preston would choose someone like her? I ran into her in town, Talia admitted. She showed me her call log. And immediately you assumed the worst, Preston said, hurt evident in his voice. After everything we've shared these past weeks, you still don't trust me. It's not that simple, Talia said, feeling tears threatening. This whole situation isn't simple. You're Preston Hale. I'm the maid. Your family hates me, your ex-fiancé is plotting against me, and eventually you're going to wake up and realize this was all a mistake. Is that what you really think? Preston asked quietly. That this is a mistake? Talia couldn't answer. The fear that had been her constant companion since childhood, the fear of being abandoned, of being not enough, rose up and choked her words. I think, she finally managed, that I need some time to think. Without waiting for his response, she turned and left the cottage, her heart pounding in her chest. Talia drove aimlessly for hours, finally ending up at her mother's apartment. Dorothy took one look at her tear-stained face and pulled her into a hug. What happened? She asked, leading Talia to the couch. Talia poured out the whole story. Genevieve's manipulation, her doubts about Preston, her fear that history was destined to repeat itself. Oh, baby, Dorothy sighed when Talia had finished. You're so determined to protect yourself that you might push away the very thing you want most. What if he's lying? Talia asked. What if Genevieve is right and he's starting to remember where he belongs? Is that what your heart tells you? Dorothy asked gently. Or is that what your fear tells you? Talia was quiet, considering the question. My fear, she finally admitted. Everything Preston has done shows he's trying to build a new life, one that's honest and real. Then why are you running away? Because it's easier than waiting for him to leave, Talia said, the truth of it painful. If I end it now, on my terms, maybe it won't hurt as much. Dorothy took her daughter's hands. Talia Marie Brooks, you listen to me. Your father's weakness is not your destiny. You can choose to believe in love, to take a chance on happiness, but you have to be brave enough to risk your heart. What if I'm wrong about him? Then you'll survive, just like I did, Dorothy said firmly. But what if you're right? What if he's exactly the man you believe him to be? Are you willing to throw that away because of what might happen? Talia closed her eyes, imagining a life without Preston. The thought was surprisingly painful. In just a few short weeks, he had become essential to her happiness. I need to talk to him, she said, standing up. I need to apologize. Dorothy smiled. That's my girl. When Talia returned to Fairbridge, darkness had fallen. The cottage was lit up, warm light spilling from the windows. She parked her car and took a deep breath, preparing what she would say. But as she approached the door, she heard voices inside. One of them unmistakably Preston's mother, Elizabeth Hale. This has gone on long enough, Preston, Elizabeth was saying, her voice stern. It's time to come home. This is my home now, Preston replied firmly. This? Elizabeth's voice dripped with disdain. A tiny cottage with second-hand furniture. You were raised for better than this. Better? Preston challenged. Or just different? Because I've learned more about myself, about real life in these past weeks, than I did in 30 years in our mansion. There was a pause. Then Elizabeth's voice softened. Preston, darling, I understand you needed a break. The pressure of the wedding, the expectations, it was too much, but you've made your point. Now it's time to be sensible. Sensible, Preston repeated. Like marrying a woman I didn't love because it was good for the family business? Genevieve was a suitable match, Elizabeth insisted, and she's willing to forgive you to try again. Talia's heart sank. So that's what Genevieve had been planning, a reconciliation. I'm not interested in Genevieve's forgiveness, Preston said, his voice hardening, or in trying again. Because of that maid? Elizabeth asked, her tone incredulous. Preston, be reasonable. What future could you possibly have with someone like her? Her name is Talia, Preston said quietly but firmly, and she's taught me more about integrity and hard work than anyone in our social circle ever has. Fine, Talia, Elizabeth conceded. I'm sure she's a lovely girl, but she's not from our world. You have nothing in common. We have everything that matters in common, Preston countered. Honesty, kindness, a desire to live authentically. And what about family? Elizabeth pressed. Tradition, responsibility, do those mean nothing to you anymore? They mean something, Preston acknowledged, but not everything. Not enough to build my life on a foundation of lies. There was a long silence. Then Elizabeth spoke again, her voice calculatingly casual. Your father and I had an interesting conversation with Senator Ashcroft yesterday about the future of Fairbridge Estate. Talia tensed, sensing a threat in Elizabeth's words. What about it? Preston asked warily. The senator is still quite upset about the wedding incident. He's considering calling in all his loans to the estate, not just the one we managed to extend. If he does, Fairbridge will be forced into bankruptcy. Dozens of people will lose their jobs, including your Talia and all her colleagues. The manipulation was so blatant that Talia had to cover her mouth to keep from gasping aloud. That's blackmail, Preston said, his voice cold with anger. That's business, Elizabeth corrected, and politics. The senator wants an appropriate resolution to this unfortunate situation. Meaning what? That I crawl back to Genevieve begging forgiveness? Not necessarily, Elizabeth said, but attending the gala would be a start, showing that the families are still united despite the wedding. Hiccup. And if I refuse? Then I'm afraid the estate's financial troubles will become quite severe, quite quickly. Talia couldn't bear to listen anymore. She backed away from the door, her mind racing. Elizabeth Hale was threatening the livelihoods of everyone at Fairbridge, all to force Preston back into line. Would he give in? The Preston she'd first met might have, but the man he'd become over these weeks, she wasn't so sure. Talia walked to her car, not starting it, but sitting in the darkness, thinking. She couldn't let Preston sacrifice himself for her or for Fairbridge, but she also couldn't bear the thought of him returning to a life that had made him so unhappy. There had to be another way. The next morning, Talia knocked on Preston's door early, having spent the night in her old room at the staff quarters. He opened it immediately, relief washing over his face. Talia, I was worried when you didn't come home last night. I needed time to think, she said, stepping inside, and I need to apologize. I should have trusted you about Genevieve. It's okay, Preston said, reaching for her hand. I understand why you were worried. I heard your mother last night, Talia admitted. I came back to talk to you, but she was here. I overheard everything. Preston's face darkened. Then you know what she's threatening. Yes, and that's why I've made my decision. Talia took a deep breath. I'm going to take the promotion. Moving back to the main house will put some distance between us, which might help convince your family that you're coming to your senses. What? No, Preston protested. I'm not giving in to their manipulation. Preston, listen to me, Talia said urgently. This isn't about giving in. It's about buying time. If Senator Ashcroft calls in those loans, everyone at Fairbridge loses their jobs. We can't let that happen. So what's your plan? We pretend to drift apart while I play the good son again? Preston shook his head. I won't go back to living a lie. Not a lie, Talia insisted, a strategy. You attend the gala, make nice with your family and the Ashcrofts. Meanwhile, I use my new position to learn everything I can about the estate's finances. There has to be a way out of this situation that doesn't involve you sacrificing your happiness or everyone losing their jobs. Preston looked at her with growing admiration. You do that. Take a job you know is being offered for manipulative reasons. To protect the people I care about? Absolutely. Talia squeezed his hand. But we have to be smart about this. Your mother can't know that we're still, whatever we are. In love, Preston suggested softly. Talia's heart skipped a beat. Is that what we are? I know what I am, Preston said, pulling her closer. I'm in love with you, Talia Brooks, and no amount of family pressure or financial threats is going to change that. The certainty in his voice melted the last of her doubts. I love you too, she whispered. That's why I can't let you throw everything away for me. Preston kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and determination. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Okay, he said, we'll try your plan, but I'm not pretending for long, just until we can figure this out. That's all I'm asking for, Talia assured him. The night of the Hale Foundation gala arrived. Talia, now officially the assistant estate manager, was supervising the staff working the event. From her position near the kitchen, she could see Preston in his tuxedo, moving among the elite of Savannah society with practiced ease. He looked like he belonged there, handsome, confident, every inch the heir to the Hale fortune. Beside him, Genevieve Ashcroft glittered in a designer gown, her hand possessively on his arm. To anyone watching, they looked like the perfect couple reconciling after a temporary setback. Only Talia could see the tension in Preston's shoulders, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes. Only she knew that this was all an act, a necessary deception to protect Fairbridge and its staff. Elizabeth Hale appeared at Talia's side, startling her. Miss Brooks, she said coolly, the event seems to be running smoothly. Well done. Thank you, Mrs. Hale, Talia replied, keeping her voice professional. I see you accepted the promotion. A wise decision. Elizabeth's smile was thin. It suits you better than other roles you've attempted to fill. The barb was clear, but Talia refused to rise to it. I'm grateful for the opportunity. As you should be. Elizabeth glanced toward Preston and Genevieve. They make a handsome couple, don't they? It's good to see things returning to their natural order. Before Talia could respond, Senator Ashcroft tapped a knife against his champagne glass, calling for attention. The crowd quieted as he stepped to the center of the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, I have a special announcement to make tonight, one that I believe will please you all. Talia felt a sense of dread. This wasn't part of the program she'd been given. As many of you know, my daughter Genevieve and Preston Hale experienced a temporary misunderstanding a few months ago. The senator's choice of words drew knowing chuckles from the crowd. But I'm delighted to announce that they have reconciled their differences and are once again engaged to be married. A collective gasp, followed by applause, swept through the room. Talia felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. She looked to Preston, expecting to see the same shock on his face. Instead, he was smiling, raising his glass in acknowledgement of the announcement. Beside him, Genevieve beamed triumphantly. It had all been a lie. Their plan, their love, all of it. Just another rich man's game. Talia couldn't breathe. She backed away, needing to escape before the tears threatening to fall embarrassed her in front of everyone. She hurried through the kitchen and out the back door, gulping the cool night air. Talia, wait! She turned to find Preston rushing after her, his face frantic. I didn't know, he said urgently. I swear to you, I had no idea the senator was going to make that announcement. You certainly played along well enough, Talia said bitterly, raising your glass, smiling for the crowd. I was in shock. What was I supposed to do, 'cause another scene? Preston ran a hand through his hair in frustration. This is exactly what we were trying to prevent, Ashcroft forcing my hand with a public announcement. So what now? Talia asked, crossing her arms. Are you going to marry her after all? No, Preston said firmly. Absolutely not. But I need time to figure this out. If I publicly reject Genevieve again, Ashcroft will follow through on his threats. Everyone at Fairbridge will suffer. Talia felt trapped just as Preston was. So we keep pretending for how long? Until the wedding? Until your honeymoon? Stop it, Preston said, taking her shoulders gently. Look at me, Talia. I love you, only you. We will find a way out of this mess, I promise. She wanted desperately to believe him, but the sight of him standing beside Genevieve, looking every inch the perfect society couple, had shaken her to her core. I need some time, she said, pulling away from him. This is all too much. Talia, please. Preston. Genevieve's voice rang out as she appeared in the doorway. There you are. Everyone's looking for you. We're expected to dance. She noticed Talia and smiled coldly. Oh, Ms. Brooks, shouldn't you be supervising the catering staff? Preston's jaw tightened. "Genevieve, I need a moment." "We don't have a moment," Genevieve insisted, taking his arm. "Our families are waiting." She began pulling him back toward the ballroom. Preston looked back at Talia, his eyes pleading for understanding. "Go," Talia said quietly. "Your fiancé is waiting." The next day, Talia moved her things into the staff quarters at the main house. The distance she'd suggested as a strategy now felt like a painful necessity. She threw herself into her new role, learning everything she could about the estate's operations and finances. What she discovered was troubling. Senator Ashcroft's loans weren't the only financial pressure on Fairbridge. The estate had been mismanaged for years, with Elizabeth Hale treating it more as a status symbol than a business. Without significant changes, Fairbridge would be in trouble with or without the senator's threats. A week passed with no word from Preston. Talia saw him occasionally, always with Genevieve or his parents, always playing the part of the prodigal son returned to the fold. She tried to tell herself it was still an act, still part of their plan, but doubt crept in with each passing day. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, Preston appeared at her office door, closing it behind him. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "There's nothing to say," Talia replied, keeping her voice steady. "You've made your choice." "No, I haven't," Preston insisted. "I've been playing for time, just like we agreed. But I've also been working on something." He placed a folder on her desk. "Take a look." Warily, Talia opened the folder to find financial documents, property deeds, and legal papers. "What is this?" "My solution," Preston said simply. "I've liquidated my personal trust fund, the one my parents can't touch. I've used it to pay off Senator Ashcroft's loans to Fairbridge." Talia stared at him in shock. "You did what?" "Fairbridge is now free and clear of any debt to the Ashcrofts," Preston continued, "which means the senator has no more leverage over the estate or its employees." "But your trust fund, that was your security, your independence." "And I used it for something that matters more," Preston said firmly. "The freedom to choose my own path, to choose you, if you'll still have me." Talia's mind raced, trying to process what he was saying. "What about Genevieve, the engagement?" "There is no engagement," Preston said. "I've already told her and both our families it's over. For real this time." "They'll disown you," Talia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Probably," Preston agreed with a small shrug. "But I don't need their money anymore. I have a job, a small savings account, and—" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. "A cottage of my own." "The cottage?" Talia asked, confused. "I bought it from the estate," Preston explained. "It's not part of Fairbridge anymore. It's just mine. Small, simple, but mine. Paid for free and clear." Talia couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You gave up everything, your trust fund, your family, your position, for a cottage and a job as a waiter." "No," Preston said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I gave it up for the chance to live honestly. And for the woman I love, if she'll forgive me for taking so long to find my way back to her." Talia stood, moving around the desk to face him. "Do you know what you're giving up? Really understand it? Your family, your world, that world was suffocating me," Preston interrupted. "And any family that would force me to marry someone I do not love isn't a family worth having." He took her hands in his. "The only thing I can't bear to give up is you." The sincerity in his eyes, the sacrifice he'd made, broke through the last of Talia's defenses. This wasn't a rich man's game or a temporary rebellion. This was love, real, sacrificial love. "I was so afraid," she admitted, her voice breaking. "When I saw you with Genevieve at the gala, it was like my worst fears coming true." "I know," Preston said gently, "and I'm so sorry for putting you through that. But it's over now. No more pretending, no more games, just us, figuring out our future together." "And what does that future look like?" Talia asked, allowing herself to hope again. "Well," Preston said with a smile, "I'll keep waiting tables while you finish your business degree. Then maybe we can start that housekeeping service you've always dreamed of. I'm getting pretty good at cleaning toilets." Talia laughed through her tears. "You're insane, you know that? Giving up millions for a maid." "Not just any maid," Preston corrected her, pulling her close. The woman who taught me what really matters. The woman I want to spend my life with." As he kissed her, Talia knew that her mother had been right. The question wasn't whether to trust her heart about loving Preston. The question was whether Preston was the kind of man who would choose her when it was hard, when there was a cost, and he had answered that question in the most definitive way possible. 1 year later, Talia stood at the back of the estate's garden, watching as another bride walked down the aisle. The wedding was smaller than the one that had nearly happened between Preston and Genevieve, but no less elegant. Fairbridge Estate was thriving under new management, Talia's management as it turned out. Her promotion to assistant estate manager had been just the beginning. With her business degree finally completed and Preston's unwavering support, she had taken over as general manager when Mrs. Winters retired. The estate was now running profitably for the first time in years, with a reputation for exceptional service and attention to detail. Preston stood beside her in the shadows, watching the ceremony. He looked different now, his hair a little longer, his face more relaxed, his designer clothes replaced by well-worn jeans and a simple button-down shirt. A year of waiting tables had turned into a partnership at his friend's restaurant, where Preston had discovered an unexpected talent for the business side of hospitality. They still lived in the little cottage, which they had slowly made their own. Preston's parents had indeed cut him off completely, but he didn't seem to miss his old life. If anything, he seemed more alive, more present than ever before. As the new couple exchanged vows, Preston leaned in and whispered, "I still haven't danced with the woman I was meant to marry." Talia turned to him, not smiling, but steady. "Then maybe you should ask her." Preston reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, not the massive diamond Genevieve had worn, but a simple band with a single perfect stone. "Talia Brooks," he said softly, "will you marry me? Not because of who I used to be, but because of who I am with you." Talia looked at the man before her, not Preston Hale, the millionaire heir, but simply Preston, the man who had given up everything to find himself and to be with her. "Yes," she said, her heart full. "Yes, I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then reached out his hand. "May I have this dance?" And this time, without hesitation, she took it. As they swayed together in the shadows of the garden, Talia thought of her mother's words about men who stand beside you in the daylight, not just behind closed doors. Preston had done more than that. He had stepped fully into the light of an authentic life, choosing love over privilege, truth over expectation. Sometimes it seemed love could come after humiliation, after rejection, after the world's idea of perfect was stripped away. Sometimes a different ending was possible. The end.